All right, so here we go with our lesson. So relativity, I'll put up the definition of relativity. We got something in relation to another thing. We've got a square versus a square. Got a square versus a circle. A circle versus a triangle. And then maybe even we've got a cube versus a square, or a circle versus a sphere. I've introduced this topic and this idea in the introduction of the relationship videos, but in terms of relativity, this is what we're speaking of. So if we go back to the beginning of everything. So here I want to reference infinity, right? So ultimately, the question comes back to, how does everything start? And with relativity, there has to be something constant that we can compare it against. So if we don't have something in particular we're relating this to, then relativity, everything's relative in that case, where you can't be certain, and then that uncertainty is the certainty, which contradicts itself and serves no purpose, which is what I'm going to get into here. So when we think about infinity, as we have I've presented multiple times one time, we think about infinity, right? This is the pathway of time. So what does infinity and our reality consist of? Consists of time and space. And it's a continuum. So you hear in science fiction a lot about this time and space continuum. Well, that is what that's referring to. Time and space. So what is time? The time is the moment that this was created, so the beginning start line, the beginning point. Where is it? It doesn't matter to us. All these dashes could have been the beginning. I could use another color. Matter of fact, let me delineate as I've done before. Any of these things could have been the start. Any point. But where are we relative to this? We are always in the center of it all. Now, I don't dare to say I'm the first person to come up with this, because I'm not the person that came up with this symbol. But this is how we can think about these things. It looks like a nice, beautiful bow tie. So this is the past here. So relative to us, this is our past, and this is our future. Looks similar, right? Similar shapes. The past is the best predictor of the future, but it's not necessarily, it's not certain, because you can only see certain distances in front of you from this. We're looking at the very outside. Time and space. Time is the point in which it creates. Space is the containment of this. Within time, what area, the mass of things, the mass, the volume, its point in anything like that. So that can be explained much more in depth if you want to go into other people's research of that. But time and space, bound to it. We are bound to time and space. Now, when we think about the beginning of infinity, you got there's this thought that we keep having, because within our time and space, within our observation of these phenomena that occurs inside this continuum, we realize that everything within our reality is bound both to time and space. Now things can be manipulated through space. We're always consuming time. We can record history, right, of time and space. But where does it begin, right? That's the age-old question right now. Where does it begin? If we understand that everything in our reality, in our universe, is bound to this, and we can, within our reality, come up with reasons for the things that we see and observe. We can come up with reasons for how those things happen. Not necessarily the past things that happen, but we can use what we know now to sort of assume or predict or theorize what has happened in the past as well. So that's very helpful. However, what we'll get into here, we'll keep that there, come back to what I believe. Because I believe in infinity, sort of. But there is a starting point, right? We know there's a starting point. We are unable to observe it, but we know that there is one. So with that, the starting point of time and space, the moment time exists, or the moment space exists, time exists as well. Because with our reality, anything that we do, anything that we think, anything that we create has to abide by the same rules, the same starting points, is an effect of something pre-existing. That goes for space and time. It had to have been created. That's something that we can agree on. Now, the common argument or arguments are that there's some there's something within our space and time that pre-exists outside of space and time to then create space and time. No matter how multiversal you think about this, no matter how relative, no matter the situation in what you believe this is true, no matter how interdimensional your thought process is with this idea, it all comes back to the same truth, that there's a line, right? Starting point of an arrow that then continues, and then if you want to, as you make minor adjustments, it can change direction, but there's always a starting point. This might resemble something similar to you. So we have a line that begins, and this beginning is taken also throughout the succession of this line. It continues with things that have quite the striking similarities in terms of straightness of the line. They abide by the same rule of beginning, completion, then continuing and creating something else. Whether or not that thing looks identical to it is varied. And then we also have this pattern of where it goes, right? The first line starts the possibility of that, but what is before this first line? There's no rhyme or reason to why I drew that. These lines can never know why I drew these lines, right? The lines know they've been drawn. They know they are acting in existence. They are there for the purpose of what it is. The questioning to that, what happened beforehand, is the initiation. This line existed only because of a thought that happened outside of its own creation. Because this line is now created, there is known to have been something else that could have possibly operated within, because we know it's operating in the same space and time. But when we're actually viewing true space and time and beginning of it, we know that the materials used to create these patterns, these connections, this linear motion, these curves, that the materials do not pre-exist. I mean, the pattern does not pre-exist the materials, and the materials do not pre-exist the creation of the materials. Now, the possibility of it, yes, the relative possibility, so probability. So now the probability, the possibility, or the relative possibility with the probability is why, right? Explaining why the succession of these things happen, why in time and space came together, why time and space came to be. There's no function, right? There's no understanding outside of space and time for us, because our thoughts could not even exist without space and time. So with that understanding, we have to have the understanding that if we're even able to think about space and time, it's unequivocal. It should be unequivocally matched to the notion that the existence sorry, I just got taken away with drawing that there. I saw a face in the and I just drew the face I saw. So because our thoughts, right? Because thought consciousness, in terms of human consciousness, or animal consciousness, anything that makes choices, so relative consciousness, anything with consciousness is bound to space and time. So that consists of the elements, any detected elements used in chemistry, biology, physics, and arithmetic. And then we got behavior rule, which are also corresponded with chemistry, biology, and physics. Behavioral, we got instinctual, which is a part of behavior, but you can really break these down. All these things, and you can keep naming them name as many as you want. These are just a few I've named. For the sake of time, I'm not saying everything. I can't say everything. But you can go and look into these things and see exactly how nothing is not bound to space and time within our reality. So prior to the formation of these things, because these things exist within time and space, they could have very well existed outside our now current time and space. So if we're considering this current, right, that's relative, right? Current. That's what we can now observably see. Is our current relativity. These are the things we are currently able to observe. If any time before our observation it was different, we can predict the difference there might be due to the maturity of the elements or biology or the knowledge that we have, right? And many things are lost throughout history, so that very well could be possible. But with what we currently have, we understand that because these things are bound to space and time, and we are pretty certain on these things, These are things that should be held because it should be certain. This is something I believe. This is the thing everyone should believe, that when you have anything, when anything exists, anything physical, so in terms physical, something detectable, right? Even if it's microscopic, even if it's microscopic, if it's a particle, if it's something that can be visualized at any formal way, right? In a physical way, it can be identified. Time and space exists because that thing exists within space and time, right? Because if you think about the dissipation, the reason, or the how it got there, right? How it got there. Got meaning it's somewhere, right? It can only exist with space, right? The precursor to that is what? We have to have something that is not confined to space and time and physical, our physical realm, our physical universe, our physical dimensions, our physical reality. So this is a thought of consciousness. So there has to be a I'll erase this. There has to be a non-physical pre-existent exister, right? Something exister or / cause. So what would we call that? We would call that energy. But with any calculable energy in our realm of existence, any of that energy would need a physically observable reactant. It needs something to react against. All forces that are observable is attributable to a physical force. That's why you can computate certain calculations, because there is something detectable. There's something that you can theorize based off of something physical that has been observed in the physical world, that you can recreate, and you can set different boundaries for their capabilities within a system, within a simulation, right? So there has and must be a non-physical, pre-existent exister or cause. I said it in one of the most simple ways I can explain it, without going into more specifics of things that I've come to know and things I could explain. And this is another thing. I'm going to abbreviate the non-physical NPC. Okay, see, this is fun. The non-physical cause NPC. If you're familiar with video games, NPC stands non-playable character. Something that exists within the thing, right? But it cannot be. You can't change anything about it. But it exists, right? You personally can't change anything. You can interact with it potentially, but you cannot change anything about it, okay? Usually, right? And then that's something even within NPC. Non-physical cause it creates. So what's a symbol for creates? I don't know. I'll just spell creates out. Because a non-physical cause creates consciousness, which is also non-physical. Consciousness is only detectable with physical. So you cannot detect You cannot physically detect. I talked about this in a recent video. Go watch that about life support. I explained there where you can detect the sign of life and such. So consciousness is not detectable. All right. Also not detectable. It creates consciousness, human consciousness. It creates animal consciousness. It must also be conscious or be superior to. It must be greater than, or NPC must be greater than or equal to, right? Greater than or equal to human / animal consciousness. Now, I've never had this explained to me, so please tell me if there's something I'm missing, something that can be shared more. I would love to do that. But in terms of what is detectable with science and what I've been told to consider throughout time and with the things that I've learned through institutionalized education, I've sought out further than that. And I've also pondered on these things outside of what I have chosen to go research thereafter. And I too understand that are plenty of people that come to the same conclusion I have in different ways. I don't necessarily look to those people as contributors to what I've thought, because it's something that I've purposely wanted to find out myself I've exposed myself to the opposing view. So what I already believed, I tried to disprove what I believe. So in doing that, I was able to provide myself with even more support. And actually they have a lot of things that are true, right? And that gets into the relativity of things of when does time exist and all. The timing is the issue, right? The creation of time, the events that play throughout time is the probable relative possibility fact. Those are things that are theorized, and you cannot be centered on those. And anyone that tells you this is the definitely way to happen is lying if it does not follow the rules of time and space, right? So this is indubitably the process. It has to be, right? And what do most people call a non-physical causant? With consciousness, greater or superior to that of animals or humans. They call that God. Is it difficult? Is that difficult to come to? It's not that difficult. What is difficult is what people perceive as the character of God and the reasons God for having doing things and the things God wants us to do, right? So if you want, I'll explain that more later, but that is, and that's going to be in a completely separate, different field, because all that would be theorized. I mean, it's not really, because it would still apply to the rules of space and time, and that's actually a very enjoyable and entertaining topic. Speaking about a God, right? But it's also one people are very sensitive about because they hold these things so true to heart. And I honestly don't think many people have challenged themselves enough. And if they did, I think lots of the arguments people have against there not being a God are uneducated, as well as some people, as most of the individuals that hold a stance that there is no God. I think the correct stance is the God that is perpetuated within religion cannot exist or does not exist. I would more so agree with that than there not being a God at all, because that's ridiculous. God is just a word for this proven thing here. And if you don't accept that as proof, do it more eloquently, do it more logistically, do more calculations than I have. This is the simple version. If you want the extended version, ask me, and I'll play by your rules, right? But we got to keep it consistent within the line and possibility of space and time. So if you take it outside of that, then you're theorizing about something that is not possible in our current reality, right? So if you're talking about something that you can't observe, creating something, so something that we know, it's challenge me. You may challenge me, and I accept any challenge. But this is the most logical conclusion. And I told you about the argument about what God wants in that. But that seems quite simple to me. Is there a God? There has to be a non-physical causer that has a consciousness equal to or superior to that of the consciousness it has created. That's simple to me. All right. Thank you all for coming back to this lesson. This is a little clip of this series, but that was that's the beginning of it. That's the basis, and we'll get back into the lesson in a later video.